Here's what they don't warn you about: peptides and PEDs, which are everywhere right now. By the way, Coke Zero, the king of sugar-free beverages. And peptides are everywhere. PEDs have been around for a long time, but they're more mainstream now for like replacement therapy, like testosterone, growth hormone. Then you've got your BPC 157 for joint health. That's peptide. All the GLP-1 drugs. More recently, retatrutide, but obviously tirzepatide is epic, and so on. And then you have your traditional bodybuilding drugs that have been around forever, and we know the side effects of those are quite well documented. And frankly, I've experimented with some of this stuff myself in the past, and I'll get into the pros and cons. But there's something missing from this conversation right now. What happens when the tools or the shortcuts start becoming the foundation? Because there is research behind some of these that they legitimately work. Some have legitimate medical applications in the right case. Some are promising. But there are a few things I wish people talked about before sticking a needle in themselves, and that's what this video is about today as a cautionary tale. Number one, sometimes the drug works, but sometimes there's a placebo effect at work because you're on the drug. This one fascinates me about the research. Like, say you're spending $300 a month on a peptide, injecting it every morning. You've done the research. You've seen the case studies of people on Reddit saying this worked for them. You're convinced it's going to help you improve recovery, help you lose weight, whatever. Now, what else happens though? Suddenly you're more consistent with your workouts than you've ever been. You're tracking your calories more consistently than you ever have. You're skipping that third beer on the weekends. You're sleeping 8 hours because you want to maximize the peptide, right? You're invested. You don't waste it. I'll get back to that later. And then 6 weeks later, holy crap, this stuff works. I'm down 10 pounds. And maybe it was the stuff, but how much was you? The fact that you finally started behaving like somebody who cared about the results. There's good evidence that expectations can affect outcomes. That doesn't mean the peptides are completely placebo. Maybe there was actually something in that vial, but it means you shouldn't automatically attribute every improvement to the peptide in this case. Sometimes the $300 injection gets the credit for what the chicken breasts and the squats and the effort you put in actually did. That's also why coaching works so well. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Most people know what to do, but when they finally invest money into someone and that person invests their time and expertise in them, they show up differently. They get the accountability to do things consistently. Magic. Number two, nobody talks enough about what happens when you stop. Now, it depends on the drug. For me, back in 2011, 2012, I did a steroid cycle, including trenbolone. Like, I went right into the deep end. Like, that's the most hardcore one. And I felt pretty good while on. I had a bit more anger, I would say, a bit more assertiveness. It was actually kind of cool how I kind of operated differently because I'm kind of fairly laissez-faire, low dopamine, whatever happens kind of guy before that cycle. And so it really gave me an edge. But I came off and crashed hard. My mood went to the toilet. I had no desire for sex. I felt depression for months. Now, many would say just stay on a low dose of testosterone. You won't deal with that. That wasn't something I realistically wanted to do at that age. I was in my early 20s. And today we know that steroids suppress your HPTA, like your hypothalamic pituitary testicular axis. In translation, your brain gets the message that there's enough testosterone floating around your system, so it pretty much stops its own production. But then when you remove the drugs, that natural production doesn't just snap back. And in some cases, it can be a long, drawn-out recovery period. If you've been on long enough, maybe you never can quite get that production back. And then that leads to low mood, fatigue, insomnia, loss of libido, like a laundry list of issues, because we're meant to have some healthy hormones in our system. So that's documented. That's the risk with anabolic steroids, is the crash afterwards. Some of these peptides, unlikely to have that, but there are their own version of that no free lunch response. Okay. Number three, there's a psychological trap nobody puts on the label. So let's say you build the best physique on steroids or on peptides, and then you come off and you're weaker, you're flatter, you're carrying less muscle, your workouts, you're just not recovering as much as you could. Now, for me, I didn't have an addictive personality. I didn't want to experience that crash again, so I never went back. But I see the appeal of going back, right? You know, for that's one of the mechanisms of steroid dependency, like body dysmorphia, right? You never can be big enough if you're not on. So you don't necessarily become addicted to the drug, but you're chasing the high that it produced for you. That version of you that was enhanced, that just looked better. Okay. Normal starts to feel inadequate. And that's a dangerous moving target, because then replacement therapy isn't enough. You need to keep adding more compounds to try to continue to get bigger and bigger and more lean, etc. And that's the real challenge a lot of people get into, especially in the bodybuilding space, less so for the average person who just wants to lose a few pounds. But once you get there, you realize that itch has to continually be scratched, and good enough is never enough. Number 4, honestly, your issues with hormones or health probably are more directed to your lifestyle. If you fix that first, you wouldn't need to go down these roads. For testosterone, for example, an overweight 45-year-old guy, he gets blood work done. He's low normal testosterone, but he barely exercises. He's got a 42-inch waist, probably has sleep apnea, which obviously affects a cascade effect of many things, but obviously your testosterone level comes back low, and he says, I need to get on the injections. But obesity itself is strongly associated with lower testosterone. Losing body fat would have likely, in most cases, improved his hormonal environment without the lifelong hormone replacement. And testosterone isn't free. There are legitimate side effects, especially if in obese individuals. You thicken your blood so that hemoglobin and hematocrit goes up potentially to dangerous levels over time. So that's a legitimate reason why you need ongoing blood work and monitoring and adjustments. Plus body fat, like if you're overweight, adipose tissue, that expresses aromatase, which is essentially the enzyme involved in converting testosterone into estrogen, estradiol. So you simply inject more testosterone into an unhealthy body, more of that's going to convert to estrogen. And then obviously men don't want estrogen too high for a variety of reasons. Okay, so the first prescription before you inject, if you're a man over 40 and you feel low energy, lose 30 pounds, lift some weights, get your sleep adjusted and on track, then reassess, then get blood work again and see if it's truly something you need. Number 5, PEDs can change things you can't see in the mirror. So you might feel amazing, but your blood work could be a mess. Higher blood pressure, worse cholesterol profile. If you want to have kids someday, suppress fertility, that may be a permanent thing. That's not something you particularly want. Like heart function, structure, cardiovascular risk, there's even some neurotoxic results in the research showing you just get dumber over time, depending on the drugs you're using. Okay. Greater heart wall thickness, left ventricular mass, which is normal and healthy, like athletes to grow a little bit, but to a point beyond that, of course. And then you have bodybuilders dropping dead in their 40s. Not good. Number 6, fertility is another one guys forget about. Like when you introduce external testosterone, it suppresses LH and FSH. Again, I'm not going to get too much into the science here, but if you're a 31-year-old man who's not had kids, but you're not in a relationship yet, and you think, whatever, I'll think about that later. If having kids is in your future, this deserves to have a conversation with your actual physician. There are things you can take to potentially mitigate that while you're on it, but it's definitely going to make it harder to have kids later. Now in the peptides, they introduce a completely different problem. I think we're number 7. With improved pharmaceuticals, you know what's in it. This research chemical world we're in right now is a lot different. You have websites that just go up overnight. Research use only. That's how they get around it. That's how they can sell it. But, these drug enforcement agencies, the FDA and the one in Canada, like they have actions they take against companies selling this stuff with unapproved products. They also have standards for compounding pharmacies that have to meet the criteria in the label. Whereas with research chemicals, safe bet, you can't guarantee that there's purity, potency, sterility, contamination. How are they storing it? Is it in someone's bathtub? Like, I hate to be fear-mongering about this. I think most of it comes from legitimate sources in China, but you never really know, right? You never really know what's written on the vial is actually what's inside the vial. That's pretty important detail when you're injecting something into your abdomen. Okay. So take that with a grain of salt. Likely safe, but you never know, right? You're taking a risk. And lastly, number 8, with a lot of these peptides, we're conducting the experiment on ourselves. Okay. Some peptides have established human data, like even the GLP-1 drugs, particularly Ozempic and tirzepatide, have gone through phase 3 trials. That's a lot of people. And if there was some real major risks that were popping up consistently, they wouldn't be able to cover that up. At least you'd hope not. Whereas some compounds being sold online have no long-term human safety data. Like even the BPC 157 that's people swear by for their joint health, like one small human trial, most of it in animals. Hopefully there'll be more research coming out. But the 300 people on Reddit that have been taking it and swear by it, that doesn't tell you what happens after they come off of it or 10 years down the road. So that's the scientifically responsible answer, is to watch out with this stuff because you don't really know the long-term implications. So am I anti-peptide or anti-PED? No, I think that's too simplistic. I mean, testosterone replacement can dramatically improve quality of life, especially if you're actually hypogonadal and you've done the lifestyle stuff and it hasn't made improvements. GLP-1 meds are changing obesity medicine. Growth hormone taken responsibly could be a really anti-aging tool, and that's one I certainly will explore for myself down the road. But these are peptides being investigated, and I'd be a hypocrite if I sat here pretending, I've never been interested in this stuff. I am. I'm fascinated by it. It's in my lane because I'm in fitness coaching. But after 20 years of trying to improve my body, like, pharmaceuticals should solve problems that pharmaceuticals are good at solving. They can't make up for bad behaviors. If you're not strength training, if you're carrying around 50 extra pounds of fat, if you sleep 5 hours on average a night, you don't know how much protein you're eating or you barely eat any, like you drink booze 3-4 nights a week, you don't have a peptide deficiency, you have a foundation problem. So fix the foundation first. Then if there's a legitimate medical reason to explore beyond that, do it with proper medical supervision, blood work, understand the trade-offs, because the boring stuff works best. And unfortunately, no one posts an unboxing video of like 8 hours of sleep and the benefits of that. But that would hold up to any peptide video for the benefits. You're getting 8 hours of sleep a night. Watch how magically your body, your health improves. Okay. I'd rather use science to support a strong foundation than use drugs to compensate for not having that, because that person's going to get better results in the long run. And that's the part I don't think gets said nearly enough when you go on YouTube and everyone's talking about the latest and greatest peptide. They may have their place, but only if layered on top of a strong foundation. So start there. We'll talk soon.